I'm Agent Morris with the NSA.
We have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft.
Traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some non-ballistic motion. Over.
Move very rapidly at any speed or whether any direction it wanted to go. Why it could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over. Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Good evening, everybody. This is Smiles Lewis, and you are tuned into another live edition of Anomaly-NOW, straight out of Austin, Texas. This is the weekly Anomaly News RoundUp show for the 501c3 nonprofit Anomaly Archives Scientific Anomaly Institute, headquartered here in Austin, Texas. And as I said, I'm your host, Smiles Lewis, but tonight's going to be special. We're going to have some guest co-hosts. Very excited to launch a new series whereby we will be inviting friends and colleagues, people of interest who have groups, Facebook or otherwise, who I want to talk to about what's going on in the anomalous realm, whether it be UFO-oriented, UAP, parapsychology, paranormal, cryptozoology, what have you. And tonight is going to be a very fun time. I'm really looking forward to seeing these two folks. It's been quite a while since I've had the chance to engage with them directly in this kind of a format, and actually for the first time with this kind of video format with one of them. And so let's just get right to it. Tonight's guests are Curt Collins, who is the blogger I've known for some time now, back in, I think 2011, 2012. I became aware of his blueblurrylines.com blog, and that's the website focused on UFO histories, mysteries, as well as its legends and hoaxes. More recently, now 2017 or back then, he launched The Saucers That Time Forgot with Cloud Falkstrom, focused on unearthing tales that UFO history has overlooked or would rather forget. He was also a contributor to the anthology that I and our other guest were contributing essays to. That was the UFOs Reframing the Debate. And Curt, before we bring on our other guest, Chris, I just wanted to say, I was recently reviewing when we last spoke, did an audio interview, and that was, I believe, December 2017. It was on the very day that we had signed the lease for our then newest Anomaly Archives location, which was fantastic. It was so great. Gosh, I wish we were still there. Not going to go into all that sad business, but that's, of course, we've been in storage since February of 2021, ripple effects of the pandemic and all that. But we still do this show and so many other things. And I'm just so glad to have you back because it's been far too long. And then we were talking about what your contribution to the anthology about the Roswell slides, who all three of us, but you particularly, had brought together all the folks that contributed to the research, the Roswell slides research group. But we'll get into that in just a moment. Again, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And let's bring on, hey, Chris. It's Chris Rutkowski.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm fair to middling, mostly middling.
Well, Chris is a Canadian science writer and educator with a background in astronomy, but with a passion for teaching science concepts to children and adults. Since the mid-1970s, he has also been studying reports of UFOs and writing about his investigations and research. He has published several books, many books actually, including Visitations, 1989, Unnatural History. Oh gosh, I'm not going to go through this whole list, dude. It's too long. The Big Book of UFOs from 2010. I also want to commend Chris, because he's also somebody who's amassed a large collection of research materials and library materials and has donated it to the university. Can you briefly tell us a little bit about that, Chris?
Sure. I was asked by the archivist at the University of Manitoba if I would be interested in donating my my UFO collection, my books, and my files to the archives, because most people aren't aware that the University of Manitoba has a large collection of paranormal funds, as they're called, ranging from audio tapes of seances to bent spoons to photographic plates of spirit photography, all that sort of stuff. Lots and lots of documentation, books, magazines, and so forth, including some UFO stuff. In fact, they have the research collection of Dan Aykroyd's father, who most people don't realize was a paranormal investigator himself, and his collections at the University of Manitoba, among many others. And they thought that my UFO collection, which since it sort of is quite Fortean and, started originally very Fortean and then eventually focused strictly on UFOs, would be an interesting addition to the archives. And so actually what you see behind me is pretty well all that's left, a small collection of documents, a few books here and there, and then some tchotchkes. You can see, for example, there's that's the alien from Close Encounters. You see Marvin down here, and do you know the name of this one here?
Is that the Reddit alien? What is that?
That's the Reddit alien, but what's the name of it?
Oh, I do not know. It's not Babendum. I know it's not that. That's the Michelin.
No, it's Snoo. As in, what's new?
Is that S?
And when I was on News Nation, behind the scenes, the producer was saying, "Wow, he's got a Snoo." So I got some brownie points with News Nation.
Well, and I was just saying off air that I caught your media appearance with them recently, and commend you for being sane and level-headed. And
you take that back.
Well, so the elephant in the room, of course, is but before I go into that, folks should know that they can, again, besides I mentioned Curt's website, blurrylines.com, and the saucers that time forgot.com, and folks can find out more about Chris Rutkowski at CanadianUFOReport.com, as well as uforum.blogspot.com. Always interesting stuff at all those websites, and all of us contributed essays to the UFOs Reframing the Debate book that came out in 2017. Right when everything changed in the UFO world, sort of. But
yeah. Well, about that, so Chris has all these movie items behind him and things like that. And, what we're seeing in the past few years kind of is like, feels to me like your favorite movie is getting a bad remake. Yeah. With, maybe J. Abrams directing. So, we've seen a lot of this before. There's some new players. There's some old ideas being circulated. And so, we can talk about some of that, some people feel that there's definitely an orchestrated scheme behind all this, definitely an agenda. And, it seems managed in a lot of ways. So, that was my little introduction for that. So we can go anywhere you want from there.
Well, and yeah, anybody who's been watching me talk about the Grush Crush, I've heard his name pronounced 3 different ways. I'm just going with Grush. Dave knows that I am very suspicious and paranoid and conspiratorially minded, and I really everything about this has felt weird to me, but. No, I mean, you're right. Everything old is new again. I mean, we kind of were seeing this with Jeremy Corbell when he was doing his documentaries, bringing back, documentaries about implants, bringing back Bob Lazar, and as he likes to say, weaponizing our curiosity, and of course, weaponizing being such a catchphrase in our modern era, because everything seems to have been weaponized, which means it's against you folks. It's not a good thing. even if it is your curiosity. I mean, I like the idea, and it's something that Tom DeLonge with To the Stars was promoting, this idea of, well, we'll use the UFO as a way to spark people's imagination and so forth. But again, DeLonge from the beginning was saying, this was in his private emails that got leaked with WikiLeaks, that his project was all about reforming the negative image that people have of the military-industrial complex and the cover-up artists who have been keeping the UFO secret. And it is like everything's old is new again. It's like I'm watching Hangar 18 as a little boy again.
Yeah. And Tom DeLonge, he had PR people on his staff, and I think, just reflecting on it, I think what we're seeing is what good marketing can do. UFOs had a really bad rap for a number of years, and then suddenly they're the in thing, but it's an in thing because they had a whisper campaign to start with, and then a little more PR and marketing, and now, once they got into the New York Times, then it's really taken off, pardon the pun, and it's, everything from The Hill to the LA Times to Debrief to, everywhere in between, Vanity Fair and so forth. It's like Mad Men have finally taken hold of the whole UFO thing, and they're running with it. And we didn't have that before. That's a very big change. And it's true. You have marketing, and you have PR people. The spin is being spun really, really well right now.
Yeah. And I actually, I don't know if you caught, Chris, it was so great seeing you at this weekend's SCU conference. I forget what they call it. Their Anomalous Aerospace Phenomena Conference, or AAPC, this being their third conference, SCU being the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies.
Ufology, yeah.
Right. Well, that's just it. They, like everybody else, got PR and rebranded, and there's so much of this rebranding happening here. And yeah, it's like we need a new shiny packaging and a bow on it, and that partly is this transformation of the UFO into the UAP, which, whatever, as long as they have the A as anomalous, I'm okay with it, I guess. But but one of the final presentations was Brian Bender. Is that his name?
Bender.
The political writer. And I thought his presentation was interesting in so much as he very early on in his talk, which he was just winging, there no slides and no real script as far as I could tell. He commented, like, we've been saying that there seems to be an agenda here, that there's a real push, and that he felt it even before. And I was surprised that he says he was surprised when the New York Times article came out at the same time as the Politico article.
And I was really impressed with Brian Bender. In fact, he was reserved, if anything, and he came across, with a very level-headed approach to what was going on. He admitted, we still don't have a lot of the details. We still need a lot more information. What's going on, Congress has to take a closer look at what's going on, and science has to be a little more involved. Scientists have to be a little more involved. There were call-outs to things like the Galileo project, and even to Gary Nolan's thing. So, it was very interesting to see that the tone of ufology has taken on a little bit differently now. Whereas, there's no question, a lot of what we're hearing, a lot of the contactee stuff, a lot of the abductee stuff, there's still a lot of woo out there. But what's happening is, now that some statements have been made that have to be addressed by NASA, by AARO, by Congress itself. If there's accusations of misappropriation of funds, that's something that can be looked into and dealt with. So, there's some very, very different approaches going on right now.
And it is a really I do feel so conflicted because on the one hand, I want to be positive and supportive of this kind of initiative. Obviously, I think all of us have long wanted, some more legitimate acknowledgement from the establishment, and we definitely got that this hearing. Even though as bipartisan as it was made out to be, there's clearly still some partisanship going on there. But there, again, the other flip side of that is there really has yet to be any significant evidence. We don't have this evidence that we need to really take this to the next level. And
yeah, people are saying this is disclosure. It's not disclosure. It would be disclosure if we had that information, but it's not disclosure. What do you think, Curt?
Oh, well, they opened the conversation and they have UFO witnesses testifying, and that's new. The information is not new, and I was really concerned about Grush's testimony because there were so many sensational claims that they go back to, Frank Scully's 1950 book about crash saucers and little men from Venus, and a lot of it also sounds like stuff from the 90s, the Phil Corso book, Day After Roswell, or any number of X-Files episodes. It's we've seen nothing to really substantiate that. And it's put up there and given the same credibility as David Fravor's Nimitz sighting and the things that Ryan Graves is reporting, which I think are mainly secondhand, but nevertheless, he was part of the squadron and has, good knowledge of what was happening. Those are considered genuine events. And I think it was a mistake. Just for example, if the Grush story did crumble or, had some kind of serious problem, it's going to taint the whole thing, including these genuine witnesses. So that's my first gripe about that. And then secondly, while I'm griping, the information that's going into what the senators are asking questions about, horrible, Nat, some UFO activists and the lobbyists are pushing these questions in a certain, very particular direction, which is all about nuts and bolts, physical saucers, and spinning it as the national security concern. So that's, I think there's more to it than that, but that's all that's being talked about.
Mm. Yeah, that's from the very beginning is, of course, anytime you've got the military being the one leading the conversation, it's going to be still towards interpreting and analyzing things in terms of threats and talking about it in terms of national security, which is certainly an issue. And it's the air safety issue is certainly one of import as well. And of course, Ryan Graves and others are now part of these. Actually, I was surprised to learn that Brian Bender, whom we mentioned, the Politico journalist, is on the advisory board of one of these new, maybe initials APA, I'm not sure, but it's an air safety oriented UAP organization that Ryan Graves is involved with. And I just think back to, I'm not drawing a blank on the acronym of the organization, but Richard Haynes is, I believe, there was the whole aviation safety, NARCAP. Thank you, national, yeah. And it's so that even that isn't new. But again, it is good to see it getting legitimacy. But it does really just end up seeing like a military recruitment or funding campaign. And I know, as much as it makes sense to ground everything in a more rational, down to earth, nuts and bolts assessment of the situation. I know, at least for me, and I know, Chris, you've written about this, and we've already alluded to the abductions and the contactees and all the stuff that's the periphery, but to my mind is like the bread and butter of quote unquote the UFO community, and because it's always about, have there been people interacting with this phenomenon? And obviously eventually we might get there, but these hearings seem so much more obviously geared towards skiffs and better data analysis and reverse engineering, or even as Gary Ellen is always saying, trying to let's monetize this technology. But that goes back to DeLong's agenda as well with To the Stars Academy, was create the pipeline for whistleblowers to come forward and let's finally unleash this technology into the public sphere, or at least make it more accessible to more mainstream scientists and not black budget secret programs. If they can prove any of the claims, it will be a coup. But as always, I advocate skepticism. So, Chris, you've been making the rounds. What is your sense of the media's reaction to all this? Because you've been on a few news shows talking about this.
Well, I know people are clamoring, how come mainstream media isn't paying any attention other than News Nation? It seems that media are ignoring it. And the reality is mainstream media are paying attention. I mean, the CBS, ABC, CNN ran a story or two. And I mean, I did, about a dozen mainstream media. I did a mainstream media thing today. And the thing is, they're not running with it as much as people want to, because that's not how newsrooms work. The reason why this, aliens are here, the whatever headline, is because that's not what we've heard. And that's not what newsroom editors are hearing themselves. They need to, have some verifiable facts. Let's just take one example, that the American military has let's say a bit of a crash saucer. Well, where is it kept? What does it look like? What's its composition? Who can I talk to who's seen it? How many people are involved in the program? Those are all things that media would want to know before running with the story, and we simply don't have that. They're great stories, but we've had these great stories before. And in some cases, they were done in a little more flourishing style in the 1950s and 60s. Now we have them in front of Congress, which is a little drier. They are, bombshell, I suppose, in some way, but they're the stories themselves are a little worn.
So, Ed, what do you guys make of Sean Kirkpatrick's apparent going outside the system and posting his criticism of Grush and calling him a liar, basically, by his LinkedIn page, if that appears to be legit. I think has been semi-verified, and there has been at least some semi-mainstream news coverage of it. And that's where, again, the mainstream seems to be like, oh, well, we'll talk about the fact that the DOD are being insulted and feel, that this is a slap in the face. What do y'all make of Kirkpatrick going that route?
It's unusual for sure. We rarely get them to comment on the topic at all. But I think he was, he and his team were, he took personal offense at that. And he did specifically target the things that Grush was saying. And, he had already testified to the contrary about all these things. And Grush essentially has called him a liar. So, it was a rebuttal. And interestingly, the Pentagon has commented on that. They said, and now it was interesting that it was reported by some news agencies as they distanced themselves from his response. But all what was said was that it was his personal response, not done through official channels. And they didn't say anything about the content of it. And there was a comment on some of the materials, which was just basically like, no, we haven't had anyone die from or being threatened for talking to Arrow. And it was almost a point by point refutal of, we don't have crash materials and so on. So, and that was also an unusual step. So, it's definitely shaken things up and gotten a lot of attention. But it does seem like there's some hurt feelings and some personality clashes in this.
I really sympathize with Kirkpatrick because, he does have some pride in his staff and in the work that he's doing. And I have no doubt that he has not seen anything verifiable along the lines of what Grush has been saying. Previously, we've had these stories I mentioned, back to the 40s and 50s, the same exact stories. Even, day before Roswell, Corso's book, all the stuff we're hearing now basically comes from that book. But what the difference is now, there has been official, agencies that have been looking into the thing, and they haven't found anything like that. So now there is these two sides that are visible. Before we had all the stuff that the contactees are claiming, and then we had the debunkers, Phil Klass and Menzel and so forth. And the debunkers were debunkers, and then you had the people claiming all these stories, and they kept to themselves. They occasionally would get into the Skeptical Inquirer, but who reads the Skeptical Inquirer as opposed to International UFO Reporter, and who really reads that anyways? And so they were living in their own separate little worlds. Now they've actually collided in a very public way, and it will be very interesting. NASA's report, by the way, I think is due out. It's not tomorrow. I think it's Friday, right? So we get the first kind of rebuttal from NASA Friday, and then the Kirkpatrick's next report is due out, I think, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, something like that. So we do get to see a little bit more of this play out, and it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure that both NASA and Sean Kirkpatrick are going to address this again. But by that time, who knows, maybe we'll have another subcommittee from the House Oversight Committee, or I would imagine something leaks from one of the skiffs, or a private communication from Grush or Fravor or somebody to one of the members of Congress.
Yeah, I wanted to say something about Grush real quick. Most people are not accusing him of actually lying. It's just that, he believes in what he's been told, and so much of this is material that, we've heard, besides the places already mentioned, from this Wilson Davis memo, which is supposedly the recording of the conversation that Eric Davis had with Admiral Wilson. And it alleges that there are programs hiding what must be crashed material, and this dates back to the 90s, and there have been rumors about that circulating, but none of that has substance. Now, Eric Davis has clearance, and all of his friends that were part of Bigelow's National Institute for Discovery Science, many of which went on to the OSAP program, and a few of them went on to the STARS and are still active players now. They're it's a small circle of people. They've looked at this same topic. They're advocating for the same things, and many of them are, most of them are scientists themselves and have government connections and are very influential. But I just don't know that they've got anything to back up what they've been chasing for all these decades.
I agree, and I agree with your point about Grush. I don't think he's lying either. I think he is faithfully reporting what he's been told. It's just that he's been circulating in these same, among these same groups of people who've been around, changing their acronyms from time to time, but they've basically been doing the same thing for a number of years now. In fact, somebody posted his resume, his CV just the other day, and boy, that's an impressive CV. Like, this is a guy on paper who you would definitely want to have in your, in your dugout, because he's, has done some amazing things, a couple of degrees, Master of Public Administration, as well as I think a chemistry or a biology degree, something like that, plus a whole bunch of courses through military colleges and so forth, plus his experience, and now he's on the board of a lot of little things. Like, this is a guy who, by rights, you should know what he's talking about. And for him to go public with all of this stuff, people are saying, well, he's under oath. Well, yeah, he's absolutely under oath, and he's now gone public with all this information that, who knows where he got it from. But But boy, it's very interesting to see that is now going on the record in a very serious way.
I was really hoping that some of the people that he's spoken to that have led him to be able to say what he said, which is, I have been told these things by these insiders, that the whole point of this movement that seems to be afoot is allegedly to clear the way for other whistleblowers, to create the path forward for the people who have told Grush what he alleges he has been told, for them to tell their firsthand experience. And it's like, on the one hand, that is so simple. If we could just get that. And I suppose it's too much to ask for that first foray into this environment with the hearings to have that happen outright. But that's what needs to happen. That's the only way forward. The other thing I was going to say is it's clear that, and I think this is clear from Kirkpatrick's angry LinkedIn memo, that there's a lot of misinterpretation of statements or misstatements by Grush during his testimony. Kirkpatrick, I think, saying that he never worked for Arrow, which I think is just a misinterpretation of the way Grush phrased something in his talk, and Grush's claim during about he and his wife being threatened in the context of, has anybody ever been hurt by these programs or this technology or what have you, that could be taken so many different ways. Again, the fact that this is all coming about because of his, not just, I really feel like it's like all of this has come about not because of his whistleblowing about these secret programs, but because him invoking that he was retaliated against. Like somehow that's what gave it legitimacy to Congress almost. But I mean, I'm sure I'm completely missing the mark on that. But yeah, where are the other whistleblowers? We also heard rumors that there were supposed to be other people involved in that hearing, and that they all dropped out due to fear. That could just be, rumor, but who knows? So what's next? So we've got these reports from NASA and Arrow coming out, but as I think it was Coulthard was saying in a recent interview, people are being approached, alleging that there are insiders and they want to know how to proceed. But I think Ross said, Arrow doesn't even have a website or a way to contact them. And I do have to wonder and be worried about if they're, assuming there are these programs and assuming there are insiders who want to speak out, it's got to be a bit of a labyrinth to pass through to find a safe way forward, because I mean we all know how much we're all being surveilled, and if you're in these programs, you've got to be being surveilled even more than the rest of us normal folks, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. So about the credentials of Grush, one of the people that backed him, and I really have more of a question because now I've forgotten the guy's name. Admiral somebody who was retired. I think he spoke at the SCU conference. Did you guys listen to his presentation, and did he discuss Grush at all?
I saw the link you mentioned. Was this the Hill article by Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet? I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
Yeah, now he says he backs Grush. He finds him 100% credible, something like that. Now, he doesn't say he actually has the same information. He doesn't go that far, but he backs, thinks he's credible.
But he makes just a couple of interesting points. He comes up with recommendations that need to be done, and both of them involve science. He says that the scientific community should go on board, and there should be should be more cooperation between science and the military. And that has nothing necessarily to do with Grush. That's just, something that should be done. He called out Galileo project and a few other things. NASA, as I mentioned, is going to be giving a report fairly soon. And science has always been interested in this subject, although certainly not as vocal as they are now. I mean, I one of the things I did, I published a lengthy post of scientific articles written on the topic of UFOs that are published in peer-reviewed journals, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them that have been published for many, many years. Now, there's a bigger push for articles from SCU and from Galileo to get more, but there's been scientific interest in this for quite some time, just as the same way that there had been New York Times articles on UFOs that were not ridiculing or sarcastic, that were actually very serious, that date back decades now. So in many ways, we simply, we've been told that this is brand new, but, if you do your homework, and, Curt, this is really your bailiwick, bringing to light some of the stuff that's gone on before, it's new in some ways, but in many ways, we have heard this before, but it's a little different in the tone.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear Admiral GALLAUDET advocating exploration and research and things like that, because one of my fears in this is that whether a UFO fan or the public are going to think, oh, well, if all we've got to do is wait for them to open the files and open the hangar doors and see saucers, well, we don't need all this equipment. We don't need this research. But I don't think we can do that at all. I think if anything, it should reinvigorate people, and hopefully more people will become interested in the phenomena, and not just expect it to be about little men and saucers or whatever. There's something going on. I think there's enough that maybe people have been persuaded that UFOs are something real and not just the imagination. A lot of people have never accepted that, and more people, I think, are on board with that. But to take the step and try to force people to believe that it's solved and we're just waiting for the government to tell us, I think that's a huge mistake, and that's the wrong message to get out of all of this.
Yeah, it's proactive ufology, I suppose, which is something that hasn't been before, maybe. Well, that's right. That's not hardly. I mean, Rutledge and his project identification, and Ted Phillips and people like that doing the field investigations. That's been going on for quite some time. So yeah.
Well, I did want, we can show. We'll post in the show notes some of the links that we've talked about. This is the Rear Admiral Tim Gaide's opinion on
Gallaudet, yeah.
Piece over at The Hill. UFOs are the story of the century. And yeah, he's got like 3 main points. U.S. Congress should continue to demand the Department of Defense and intelligence community disclose UAP information, data, and materials to the public. U.S. government should show leadership in international scientific studies of UAP. He then mentions the San Marino Project Titan being suggested as a United Nations United Nations project. That was one of the presentations at the SCU event. And then last, the U.S. research community should significantly expand the scientific study of UAP. And it's like you say, though, there's been this, there's already been so much research. And I, again, flash back to the SCU conference this past weekend where they were showing some great ideas for projects. And there was this call for, so there can be so many multidisciplinary approaches to this, whether you need get your anthropologists or your physicists or your material sciences or your biologists or your astronomers. There's a place for a circle is measured beginning anywhere, to quote Charles Fort.
All God's people got a place in the choir.
But it reminded me of what you're just saying, that there's already been so much research. I mean, I think it's great and laudable to be saying this again. And I know we know that the search will continue. I think we might want to start wrapping up, but so we'll definitely have to keep an eye out for the NASA report, the next Arrow report. I really hope Arrow starts showing something other than just, we've got more reports. And yes, just like Blue Book, a small percentage of them remain unidentified if we only had enough information. Go ahead.
Ford, I wanted to, so with Charles Ford, some of his followers may be felt otherwise, but I got the feeling from reading his work, he wasn't about forcing explanations. He was kind of like enjoying the weirdness for what it was, and not trying to make somebody believe this or that about it. It was about asking questions. I think we need a little more of that today.
Yeah, I agree. And the compilation of all that sort of stuff. There's some talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater by only looking at very, very specific scientific data. But, we have all these great anecdotes, which admittedly are not scientific data, but, we rely on some of this eyewitness observations for so many things. It's eyewitness observations that track the monarch butterfly. Eyewitness observations were used originally to spot things like the pumpkin seed aircraft by plane spotters, realizing what was being flown around as experimental craft. And all these Forteana should be continued to be compiled. I still get my Fortean Times every month, and there's some great stuff in there. The fact that UFOs can be pigeonholed into a few categories of that suggests that Forteana is going strong.
Absolutely. And the thing about Charles Fort was he was an advocate for science in its true sense as being about intermediate knowledge. Science is about intermediatism. All science is not, we figured it out. That's the end of it. It's just the current state of a best guess, through replicability and so forth. Here at the Anomaly Archives, we're all about the weird, the wild, the woolly. Like I would say, everything from anomalistics through cryptozoology, parapsychology, ufology. So what is it? Is it UApology now with UAP? Well, guys, I really have enjoyed talking to you. It's been too long since we got together and I spoke to each of you, and maybe we can do this again. And I really would encourage folks to go to the Facebook group over at facebook.com/groups/UFO updates. We didn't really get the chance to go into some of the history of that. I wanted to tell people a little bit about the history of that, but for another time. But I really appreciate y'all coming on the show and look forward to talking some more in the future. If y'all will stay right there, we can talk after the show. And for now, good night, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Yo.